Hello there, you're welcome back to Biology Lectures with Akere Leoladimich Philip. So today we move on to ecosystem, which is, it's a lot really, but if you've not seen my last video where I talked about ecology, that's the beginning part of this section. So you want to check that out. What leads to ecosystem? There are a number of things that leads to ecosystem. Please do check out that video. I will add that in the in this link here. Now, an ecosystem is the interaction of community. So, like I said, do check the other video on this because the first video was actually on community. So, and you know that community is formed by population, and population is formed by individual. You need to check the video on that. Now, so this community is organisms living with, of course, the living organisms living with the abiotic environment. And like I said, abiotic environment basically refers to likes of temperature, light, intensity, the air, water, basically the things that makes organism to live, but they are not life. Now, this ecosystem, the size varies from place to place. For example, we have an ecosystem which can just be a garden pond. That means, please don't forget, an ecosystem must have several species in it. So check this out. So this is a garden pond. You have this different population of fish here. This fish is there. So we have different type of fishes here to form a community interacting with the environment, the abiotic environment, the air they breathe in and out, the water in which they swim. So that explains that. Also, now please don't worry about this. The woodland, don't worry about the guy. It's just a place where you have different living organisms there. All right, just that's the emphasis. Pardon the guy. So it's just a woodland where you have different organisms that will live in that forest there. Now, having established that, the next guy is the coral reef. You have different fish there, some different organisms, the lobster sort of thing. So this represents an ecosystem. That would be community of different organisms, so to say. And the last guy on the list is the desert. So here you probably have camels, you have cactus. Those are the plants. So you can go on and on. It's going to be, so mind you, it doesn't have to be only animals. It can be other organisms to put together. So this is something you want to remember. So the size varies, but really Antarctica actually is being considered to have one of the largest ecosystem. Like the number of organisms there are so much and all of that. All right, hope that made sense. Now, the interaction in an ecosystem. Please, you need to remember that in an ecosystem, if you have done the topic food chain, in an ecosystem, you expect that organisms have to interact. Some organisms will feed on others, some will be fed on. For example, here on this screen here, we have the predatory interaction, which means organisms that chase or that hunt their prey. In this case, you can see the leopard, that's not leopard, that's the cheetah, the fastest running animal, chasing a gazelle there. That's a predatory interaction because ecosystem is a community of organisms. So the community of leopards will interact with the gazelle with other organisms there. Then we have the herbivore feeding. For example, these two are herbivores. This is a rabbit feeding on the grass. This is a sunny bird, I guess, trying to get nectar there. And this is also predatory in nature. This is a carnivorous plant. Hunting, well, not hunting actually. It's just catching its prey. Then, of course, this is the pollination relationship, like I talked about. It still falls under herbivore because it's a feeding relationship between animals and plants, so to say. So don't forget this interaction. There has to be a way all these organisms interact together. So predatory, herbivorous, feeding, and pollination relationship. All right. Now, this is a part you have to pause the video here and take note. I wouldn't want to talk so much about because of time, but please pay attention to this. There are things that plants compete for in an ecosystem. They compete for light, they compete for water from the soil, compete for minerals from the soil, they compete for space, and they compete resources. Competition itself. It's not like the competition for competition. Okay, this also talks about the type of competition we have. Now, please pay attention to this. Oh, sorry. Or don't worry about this. Don't worry about this. I already talked about this in the first slide. Now, walk with me. So the truth is this. You might want to read that anyways. That last paragraph, you can read that still. Now, these four things are very important. How are they important? Light is important for photosynthesis. Water also is important for photosynthesis. Remember, if you write your equation for photosynthesis, it's going to be it is water plus carbon dioxide gives us the glucose C6H12O6 plus water. Now, so this water is important. If the water is not enough, there can be photosynthesis as well, even though it's quite very hard for photosynthesis to be affected by water. All right. Now, also, we need minerals from the soil. For example, there's this mineral called magnesium. Magnesium, amongst that, is very important. Why? Because magnesium is an essential part of chlorophyll. I know there's no chlorophyll, it cannot be photosynthesis because it's chlorophyll that attracts or absorbs sunlight to carry out the reaction. So minerals like magnesium, like nitrate, are very important. Nitrate is important to make proteins. Then space. The more space a plant has, the more it has opportunity to enlarge itself. I mean, get bigger in size, so it can actually grow more yield. So you can pay attention to this. I mean, you can pause the video here and read this more. I've actually talked about this briefly. So take your time right now and just read through this. It's really, really interesting. I don't want to make the video too long. That's why I literally just glance through this. All right. On the other hand, what are the things animals compete for? Animals compete for food, for mates, and for territory. So the food, that's what provides energy for us. For every animal, every living organism has to get food. All right, that's why you saw the other video I did talking about community. You saw intra-specific competition and inter-specific competition, whereby the animals are literally fighting for food, because they have to just fight for food. All right, their mates, for example, in the same video where I talked about communities, you want to check that out. I mentioned how the silverback gorilla sometimes fight for space and territory, and anyone that loses the battle, its wife and kids become that of the next. So organisms fight for mates, really, and also for territory. So I think that silverback what's it called? Example covers both. Also with the lion, the lion sometimes win a whole pride by getting the territory when you fight at a territory. I've seen a number of documentary on that. So these are things you don't want to forget. So you might want to pause the video here to read the relevance of each of this because of time. Like I said, I don't want to make the video so long. So pause the video here and read through all of this. Most of these I've talked about before earlier on. All right, hope that made sense. Now, you want to remember one thing, that organisms interact with each other. We said that earlier on, and they depend on one another. What does that mean? I'm going to show you that shortly. Now, if the number of producers, every food chain starts with a producer. So if the number of producers increase, that's good. If it decreases, it's going to affect the primary consumer, to affect the secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, like that. So interdependence refers to how different organisms need each other, so to say, to be able to live. All right, hope that made sense. Now, a time comes whereby it says here, the removal of one species can have a ripple effect impacting the entire community. Now, a stable community is characterized by a balance in all the species and environmental factors. So what a climax or stable community means is this. Another word for stable community is climax. Climax community is when every population is enough. I mean, like, there's a balance between the what's that word again? Between the producers, the primary consumers, they are not too much like none of the species is overloaded, so to say. You need to understand this. That's what a stable community means. Like everyone is balanced. However, let me show you an example of how these organisms affect each other. Now, say for example, now you can see the grass, the rabbit is fed on by the fox. The fox, you normally eat the rabbit. So if the rabbit population decreases, that might end up affecting this with time, even though it can feed on what's that? Okay, the sparrow. It can feed on what other things can it feed? I think the frog. Maybe these are the things it can feed on. But the truth is this: if the population of the insect reduce, it will reduce the population of frogs, and that will reduce the population. If it reduces the population of frogs, it may affect the population of the sparrow. So there's always this effect. Imagine the number of grasses reduced. That will affect literally everybody, because less grass means less rabbits, less insects, less snails. Then less snail means less thrush, and less thrush means the number of sparrows will reduce with time because their predator, their prey has reduced. So these are the things that this interdependence means. It means that this organism directly or indirectly relies on the other. Hope that made sense.